What action, if any, has he taken to follow up on his statement to Malcolm Turnbull regarding New Zealand-born Australian detainees on Christmas Island? Quotes, "I think, in the spirit of mateship, there should be some compassion shown."
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, my full statement to Mr Turnbull was where someone isn't the highest risk, where someone has a long-term community of interest in Australia, I think in the spirit of mateship there should be some compassion shown. That statement was made with regard to appeals by detainees. Since I met with Mr Turnbull, Minister Amy Adams and Michael Woodhouse have travelled to Australia with my approval and met with Immigration Minister Peter Dutton to get additional information about how Australia is managing the issue. Ministers and officials are working hard to ensure what I agreed with Prime Minister Turnbull is implemented as soon as possible, and Australia has doubled resources to speed up the appeals process. I've made my views very clear to Prime Minister Turnbull and I continue to receive regular updates on progress. I've asked Minister Adams to follow up with Mr Dutton and we expect an ongoing dialogue about where things stand.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
What representations to Australia has he made in the last 2 days to raise concerns about events on Christmas Island or to offer his help?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I personally have made none, but of course the officials and my ministers have worked their way through that process.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
Which of his statements of earlier today is correct? His statement to Radio New Zealand that the New Zealand detainees are, quotes, free to leave, end quotes, and, quotes, are staying there voluntarily, end quotes, or his statement to reporters that the New Zealand detainees who wanted to leave face many weeks of delays in a remote detention centre before they can go anywhere.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
For a start, if I didn't make the last statement, what I did point out was that it depends on the circumstances. But in terms of an individual, there are a number of factors that have to be considered. Firstly, as I pointed out this morning, whether the person has travel documentation, a passport. Secondly, whether the person has a history of violent or criminal activity. Secondly, thirdly, well, it's not actually easy because these people, some of them are rapists, some of them are child molesters and some of them are murderers. And these are the people that the Labour Party is saying are more important to support than New Zealanders who deserve protecting when they come back here. Mr Davis, if you want to put yourself on the side of sex offenders, go ahead, my son, but we'll defend New Zealanders.
Order.
Supplementary.
Order. 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 I'm on my feet. Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given that Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Switzerland and the US and many other countries all criticised Australia's treatment of many of the Christmas Island detainees at the UN just yesterday, why did his government fail to raise any concerns at all about the ill treatment of New Zealand-born detainees?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Because we don't need to go to Geneva to do that. We do it in person with the Prime Minister of Australia, and we've done that, and we do it with the Australian ministers. And I say again, we have a responsibility to those New Zealanders, and we will bring them home to New Zealand. But we will do so by protecting New Zealanders. We're not on the side of sex offenders, we're on the side of New Zealanders.
Supplementary.
Order. 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 I'm attempting to call the Leader of the Opposition for a supplementary question. It requires some silence before I do so. Andrew Little, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Why is he so weak that he spends his time with Malcolm Turnbull talking about what ties to wear, rather than having the moral courage to demand Australia and do what's right for the detainees?
Order.
Mr Speaker.
Order.
Mr Speaker,
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
We spent a considerable portion of the one-on-one meeting we had with Malcolm Turnbull talking about this issue. 2 ministers have gone to Australia to talk to Minister Dutton about this issue. I've raised this issue with Prime Minister Abbott. There have been considerable conversations going on. But, Mr Speaker, when it comes to these people coming home to New Zealand, they are free to come home and we will allow them to come home and we will ensure they come home, as long as They have the travel documentation. They can't go on a commercial aircraft if they are violent, if they have mental health issues. And, Mr Speaker, I have a responsibility to the New Zealanders here at home that they are looked after. And what the Labour Party is saying is, to hell with the rest of New Zealanders, these people should be put on a commercial aircraft and dispatched to New Zealand. Will you back the rapists?
Order. When I rise to my feet, I expect the Prime Minister then to resume his seat. Further supplementary? Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
Why has it taken an inmate to die, a 2-day fire and a full-blown riot for him and his ministers to finally lift a finger to do something about it?
The order.
Speaker,
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, the member just completely misrepresents the fact. I raised this issue in February after it became Australian law in the late part of December. Mr Speaker, I raised the issue with Malcolm Turnbull all the way through this, Mr Speaker, and our ministers have been working on this issue. We cannot stop Australia having its sovereign right to ultimately decide to deport people who are serious criminal offenders. We cannot stop that any more than Helen Clark could stop the fact that back in 2001 a whole category of New Zealanders didn't get right to residency, which is the very people, actually, if they had residency and citizenship, would be able to stay.
Order. Supplementary question, Marama Davidson.
E te māngai o te whare, tēnā koe te whare. Mr Speaker, given that New Zealanders, some of whom are people with disabilities, some who are in there merely for an unregistered vehicle, some who are in there for driving offences, given that their New Zealand human rights are being abused...
Order. Now, I will certainly give some leniency to the questioner, and that this is her first supplementary question, but we do need to get to the question. So a lot of givens, maybe one's acceptable, but a whole list of them won't be acceptable. I do need the question. Supplementary question, Madam Davidson.
Why didn't the government criticise Australia for its offshore detention centres in our submission on Australian human rights record at the UN yesterday?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, because we raised it directly with the Australian Prime Minister.
Point of order.
Point of order, Madam Davidson.
I seek leave to table New Zealand's submission to the UN Human Rights Council on Australia's appalling human rights record.
Order. Can I just check the source of this document?
Not public as far as I know, and we've searched.
Well, I'm in a difficult situation. I don't know where it's public. And the member needs to be very careful that she's not misleading the House. If the member says it's not publicly available, order. I will put the leave, and it's for the House to decide. I'm just going to clarify with the member again, is it publicly available?
It's from a journalist as the source.
Then I think it's available to all members. Further supplementaries?
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Marama Davidson.
Given Australia's continued abuse of New Zealand's human rights on Christmas Island, is it right for the Prime Minister to support Australia's bid for a seat at the UN Human Rights Council?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, as I said earlier, the government raises those issues directly of any concerns we have. We've said for a long period of time we don't like this policy. This policy is not directed specifically at New Zealanders. It's policy that they apply to all countries. But as I said earlier, when it comes to those New Zealanders, who are people actually, by the way, who don't want to claim to be New Zealanders, the whole very point is they don't want to come back to New Zealand, I have a responsibility to make sure that other New Zealanders are safe. The people who are in those detention centres have a criminal offence which has seen them incarcerated for 1 year or more, or who have serious character issues. If they actually have connection with New Zealand, the advice from the Australian Minister is a third to half of all of those appeals are being accepted. But I'm sorry, Mr Speaker, I'm not just going to take people back in New Zealand without information, without being able to protect the New Zealand public, and if those members want to protect sex offenders, rapists and murderers, go ahead. I'm not going to.
Point of order, Grant Robertson.
Speaker, I was going to wait until the end of the question, but the Prime Minister has repeated what he said more directly in an earlier supplementary when he accused the Labour Party of, quote, backing the rapists. I am deeply offended at that, and I ask that it be withdrawn.
Order. Order. This is a political debating chamber. The member may well be offended by that, but in the context of the answers given, I'm not going to take that as an... Order! I don't want to start this week by asking a member to leave the chamber, but I want to make it absolutely clear that when I'm on my feet, there is no opportunity for members to continue to interject, and that applies to both sides of the chamber.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Order.
Point of order.
I'll hear. Well, I just want to clarify with Grant Robertson that it's a fresh point of order. I'll hear from the Right Honourable Prime Minister first. Point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have the document with me, but in the meeting that I held with Malcolm Turnbull, I'm not sure whether I can actually table it. I might be able to. He gave a detailed outline of the people that are in question, the New Zealanders who are going to be deported. They are rapists, murderers.
Prime Minister, I'll resume this.
Point of order,
Mr. Speaker.
Not a point of
order. I have dealt with that matter. Fresh point of order, Grant Robertson.
Mr. Speaker, I have taken offence at the Prime Minister's comment, and I ask that he be asked to withdraw and apologise.
Order. On occasions in this House, and I've been here heard many rulings and I've given some, it's not a matter of whether the member was offended, it's a matter of whether the House was offended. Then I ask, I don't want to see the whole of this left-hand side evacuated. Members may be offended. Order! Order! I have to judge the seriousness of the allegation, and I've determined that the House should not be offended. Members, Ian Lees-Galloway, I ask you to leave the chamber. I can only give so... Are there any further
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
Order, I'll hear it in a minute. Order, I will hear it in a minute when the House settles. Fresh point of order, Chris Hipkins.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask you to reconsider. There is nothing more offensive than being accused of backing rapists. I am offended. The House should be offended.
We've covered that matter. If you take the contents of the Hansard, and I'll certainly be looking at the Hansard, I give the member that assurance, as I recall the answers given by the Prime Minister, he was saying the people who are in detention that some members of the left-hand side are expressing a great deal of sympathy for are there for reasons of serious crimes. That's how I took it. Now, we've dealt with the matter. If the members want to continue to stand and relitigate or voluntarily leave, they are welcome to do so. Are there any further supplementaries?
Order, sir. Point of order, sir.
I will hear, but if it's... Order!
It is purely concerning...
Order! No, Order! The Honourable Jerry Brownlee will also remain quiet while I hear a point of order. Before I accept the point of order, I've dealt with this matter.
Dealt with that matter.
Yes, then as a fresh point of order, I'm happy to hear it, but it better be.
I take offence at the Prime Minister's accusation that the Green Party, and particularly Marama Davidson as our representative, backs rapists and murderers, as he said in his answer to her last question.
You are only relitigating where I've already been. Question number 2.
Supplementary question, sir.
Oh, I apologise. Supplementary question, Marama Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Prime Minister, what do you say to the family of Ko Rutini, who is a decorated soldier, having served for New Zealand in Afghanistan, who has committed no crime in Australia and no crime in New Zealand, who has been detained by Border Force and held in a detention facility in Australia awaiting deportation?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have the details of his case.
Further supplementary question, Marama Fox. Marama Davidson.
Then will the Prime Minister today rule out supporting Australia's bid for a seat on the UN Human Rights Council?
I'll allow the question. The Right Honourable Prime Minister was brought in an earlier supplementary. Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the government put in the submission last night and we continue to support that submission.